This is Kristin.
And I'm Steve, and you were listening to Cycling Together, a show all about bikes, riding and riding together. I am wearing my Yeti Hunter sweater today because it is cold outside. Very, very cold weekend, and everybody's freaking out on social media. Or I should say, not freaking out. They are upset that yesterday it was 80 in New York City. So basically 100 miles northeast of the New York City region, it dropped to 40 degrees yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. This is, we always say with March,
March is the worst.
It's the worst. You think it's spring, but it's not. But that's okay. We're getting a lot done this weekend. We actually went to a first aid class yesterday, sponsored by our local New England Mountain Bike Association chapter. The first one you've ever gone to.
Yeah, it was the first official real first aid class, yeah.
I was surprised by that. I don't know how you avoided it before now, because I have gone to so many over the years between the Girl Scouts and other things, but I thought it was really good. Did you learn? Do you feel like you learned anything?
I feel like I do. I couldn't say what I learned. I think a lot of times these things are reinforcement of what you think you know.
Yes.
And therefore it's reaffirming what in your head you think you would do.
Yes.
A lot of it is common sense stuff. So in some cases it's just saying, yeah, if you think it's wrong, that's right. Wrong. It probably is. And in the way you think it's wrong, that kind of stuff. So it was certainly worthwhile doing. Absolutely.
That's good to hear. And it was a good class because unlike other first aid classes, it was geared towards mountain biking and kind of the special situations
and
you find
New England
yourself
mountain biking, right?
And New England mountain biking. I think the one that, I don't know if it's ever been a scenario, but they were talking about a scenario where you ride up and you find someone just unconscious in the trail.
Right.
And I thought, that would be horrifying. Could you imagine you're just riding along and there's just a body in the trail and a bike, and what would you do?
Right.
Most of the time the scenarios we're going to be in, we will have seen the accident. We will have seen what happened. Right, because we're riding with a group, and that's why we.
But a lot of us ride.
But it can happen.
We'll go out on a we get out of work early or whatever. Yeah. You go out, at lunch, whatever. And so a lot of us ride by ourselves, and you theoretically that could absolutely happen.
Absolutely happen. I know. Whenever I take these classes, I'm torn between, I'm never riding my bike again, because it's like, what are the worst things that could happen? You get a sucking chest wound. And then also just, I hope that never happens on my group ride, but it does. I always feel better. I feel more informed afterwards. And the more of us that can get trained, the better. And the really cool thing is the chapter paid for first aid kits for all of us that I actually worked on putting them all together, and they got a rating by the instructor.
Yep.
He said they were excellent. So pretty excited about that.
You should be. You put a lot of work into getting every individual part in that kit and then laying everything out and then putting it all together in the first aid bag. I mean, there was a lot of work going on there.
Still have to find chewable aspirin.
Right.
We'll work on that. And you also you got some education this week from SRAM.
Yeah, so I guess that's sort of the big news in the mountain biking world in terms of parts is that SRAM came out with their new mechanical transmission group set. Transmission is the derailleur which attaches directly to the frame. On any frame that has a universal derailleur hanger, you kind of get rid of that hanger and you can put the derailleur directly on the frame. There's a lot of benefits of that, but it has only been expensive electronic shifting until now.
Right.
So I think you're going to see this on just so many mountain bikes coming out. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, it is available now. You can get the parts available now. A lot of times SRAM, what they will do is they will make their big announcement when they already have the product in place in the warehouse ready to go.
I do like that.
And right. So
that seems good.
That does seem good. So I would assume it has been in the hands of the manufacturers in time to roll out new product, but that is not always the case.
Right.
Sometimes things are delayed like that, and it could be that 2025 bikes don't have that because it wasn't ready for them.
Right. So transmission, as you said, it attaches directly to the frame. So there's no derailleur hanger. The derailleur hanger is the thing I've often heard it referred to, like, if you know your Greek mythology, if the bike was Achilles, the derailleur is where Achilles' mom was holding on to. So it's the Achilles heel of the bike.
Yep.
Whenever people come in with shifting issues, it's invariably
it is very often a bent hanger.
A bent hanger. Mm-hmm. And it protects the derailleur.
And the frame.
And the frame.
Yes.
And so this thing is tough. You supposedly can stand on it.
Because the derailleur mounts on both sides of the frame.
Yeah.
And then the through axle goes through that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's basically, you can stand on it, correct. You can kick it, you can stand on it. So they came out with two levels, 90 and 70 is what they're calling them. The 90 is the better one. I think what it looks like right now, since I don't have my hands on it, but just given price points, I believe we're looking at about GX level and sort of NX level.
Okay.
And I think they assume that anybody who was going to get something in the past of XO, XX level mechanical is actually just choosing electronic now.
Yep.
This is great. I mean, GX Eagle mechanical shifting in the past was quite good.
Okay.
But it was also it could be very finicky to set up.
Okay.
You introduced all those 12 gears, the wide range, and then every little bit of movement or slop in that system just created a little bit of a problem. So it was always finicky to set up. NX even more so because the derailleur was not made to the same tolerances. It could develop slop and develop play, and then that would just make it even harder. So this is going to take a lot of that out.
Yeah. And it's now at a lower price point too. So if somebody doesn't want electronic shifting, they don't want to pay for electronic shifting, they can still have all the benefits of
or they just prefer mechanical transmission.
Yeah.
And in theory, the transmission electronic shifting system can shift. Well, we're gonna air quote this slow because it sort of waits for these shifting ramps.
Okay.
And so a lot of times people, if they want to make a lot of shifts at once and they push the button say 4 times, the derailleur almost has to catch up with those shifts to make that 4 shifts. And I have not used it yet, but from what I've heard, you could actually shift faster with mechanical version of this.
Interesting.
Yeah, can't wait to get my hands on that to try that. And then the only other thing, I guess, when we're talking about SRAM, a big thing that came from them is they are reducing down the number of different brakes they offer.
Okay.
And then they're changing everything to mineral oil. This is one of those funny cases, for years and years and years, SRAM, they had always used DOT or DOT fluid, which is what cars use.
Yeah.
It's corrosive.
Well,
it can hurt your skin if it stays on your skin for too long. It can hurt paint if it stays on too long.
Well, we talked about this on one of our past episodes, that it was great because it was universally, you could find it anywhere.
Yes. Right.
But it was bad for a host of other reasons.
Environmental reasons and just usage reasons.
Right.
And it absorbs water. It's hydroscopic, so it also needs to be bled more often and can cause a little bit more issues there. But SRAM had always been like, oh, this is the best, dot fluid's the best, it's the best, this is why we go with it. Yeah. And now suddenly it's a complete sort of reversal. And I like
dot
it.
Fluid sucks.
I prefer that. This is great that they're moving to mineral oil.
Yeah. It sounds like some good announcements out of SRAM. And actually, it's interesting that you mentioned a couple of times, like, difficulties adjusting, shifting, need to bleed your brakes more often. Because this is also, we're in spring. People are starting to think about service, getting their bike serviced. We are looking at your service packages, your pricing. We're even rolling out something new. We're rolling out our new STBG Insider program.
That's the big announcement here for that, is the STBG Insider program, membership program. Yep.
Yes. You were saying it's not an original idea. We're not the first shop to do a membership program. And ours is going to mature.
If anybody's familiar with REI, it's a little bit in a way like their membership model, where there is a one-time lifetime fee.
Yep.
And so that gets you a member in the program.
That makes you an insider.
Right. And so the whole host of reasons to do this. One of the big ones is that I am a small shop with limited availability for
Yes.
service in terms of my time. And a lot of my good customers come to me because I'm the one servicing their bikes.
Right.
But I also then get filled up with a lot of new customers
Which is wonderful.
Right, which is great, yes.
Yeah.
Because they see my 5-star review and they're like, oh my gosh, I got to come here. But a lot of these customers, they're just pulling their bike out after years. They're going to come in, they're going to get a tune-up, and I might not see them again for years.
Right.
But what happens is it can fill up my service schedule, and now suddenly all my good, loyal customers can't find any time to book with me for service.
Yeah.
So by doing this, I'm able to block out time.
Its biggest benefit right now is that there is a booking page just for insiders. Those appointments are only available to insiders. There are some other benefits, discounts on your service levels and discounts on STBG branded gear, and we'll continue to mature it. But now, going into the busiest time of year, I would say the chief benefit is making sure that the people who we want to make sure they're getting appointments or getting them. It's kind of a self-selected.
Yep.
It's not annual. It's just once, but it lets them self-select as wanting that benefit.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, but it brings up the topic for today also, which is about service.
Right. Yeah.
Because I think, well, let me just share my experience. When I started working more regularly at the shop, which was during the pandemic, and we introduced our Saturday service, drop-in service, which meant you could come and you would give a bike 15 minutes. People would say, they would come up to me and they'd say, I want to sign in. I need a tune-up. And what I realized was that was the generic term for any work needed on a bike.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even people who needed a tube replaced might sometimes
They might say, I need a tune-up.
Yes. Yep.
Right. And so that's what we're going to talk about, starting with what is a tune-up? When somebody says tune-up to you, what is that? Because I did start to learn to say, we don't do tune-ups. We do quick repairs. We do,
for the drop-in Saturday service.
And I was like, we don't do tune-ups take more than fit. We don't do tune-ups. We don't do... we do wellness checks, we do quick fixes and repairs. And they always would go, yeah, that's great. That's what I need.
Right.
I have a flat.
Right. My brakes are rubbing.
Right.
Yes, my derailleur is not shifting.
Right. So to you, what is a tune-up?
Tune-up is definitely a more comprehensive going over everything in the bike.
Okay.
But not necessarily doing everything on the bike, but not leaving things that are dangerous or need doing undone. You know, like the shop. The shop would say, "Well, you wanted a basic tune-up, but I found this. So this really should get done."
Okay.
That's an add-on.
There's two questions, because I think there's some people that say, "I need a tune-up every single year," and again, they don't know what a tune-up is.
Yep.
There are other that would say they're just priced to sell things, right? Like tune-ups are actually not necessary because it's just a bike shop doing a cash grab.
Yeah. Most shops that we have seen, we have visited, I have researched online and so forth. It is not, there's no bait and switch there like you might find in an oil change place type of situation.
Yeah.
They're not pricing their tune-ups to get you in the door and then say, aha, but this is wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong and we want to sell you this, this, and this. Yes. That is not, the tune-ups are generally not priced like that. They're not priced as a get you in the door and then we're going to charge you a lot more on top of that. The tune-up it is really good for catching a lot of early things. Okay. It's good for making sure your bike feels its best for the year. Heavy riders, I should say, high mileage riders is the better
people
term.
Who use their bike a lot.
Yeah, heavy usage riders, right? They might need multiple tune-ups a year.
Right.
Usually it's a case where they might get a tune-up in the spring and then they pop in for certain smaller items throughout the year.
Right.
But the tune-up does catch a lot of things and fix a lot of small things before they become bigger problems.
Right, because as you said, there's a safety check. There should be a safety check element to any level of tune-up, which is just make sure there's no corrosion, make sure your brake pads don't need to be replaced, make sure all your bolts are tight.
Yes.
Right? There's no wiggly bits.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
There is, I know, like one of the things we hear sometimes is say, oh, and whenever I take my bike in, they always replace the chain. And the perception on that is that's the upsell. Like they're always replacing the chain. Can you talk to me about chains for a second? Because chains, the replacement of chains can actually save you money in the long run.
It
right?
can. So this is going to get a little bit controversial in a way, maybe. But yeah, so a lot of bikes that come in for tune-ups do need a chain because chains do what's called stretch. Now, the metal, that's the term used. The chain has been stretched, right? It's a little bit confusing of a term because the metal's not stretching. What's happening is that the pins through the plates, they roll around between those plates as the chain bends around the crankset,
right.
bends between the pulleys, around the cassette. And so those round rollers start wearing down the holes that they're pressed into, making those holes bigger. And so therefore there's more slop in those pins. And if you put a worn chain up against a new chain, link for link, that worn chain is now half an inch longer, 3/4 of an inch longer than the new chain.
Right.
That means the pitch of the holes, the pitch of the plates that are supposed to engage all those teeth is now longer than those teeth. And so you begin to wear down your cassette teeth, wear down your chainring teeth, wear down your pulleys.
Right.
And so if you catch the chain, if you replace the chain at its wear point, and that varies a little bit by the speed of the chain and the type of the chain, then you can put on just put on a chain, and you can keep the same cassette for 3-4 chain replacements. You can keep the chain rings more replacements than that, and the same thing for the pulleys. They have other wear issues, but so if you use the chain for too long, it basically changes the shape. It changes the shape of all the teeth, and therefore a new chain will no longer mesh with those teeth.
So then you're forced with replacing the chain and the cassette.
Yep. Usually first the cassette, and usually it's because especially your favorite cogs that you use the most are really worn, and they will skip and pop.
Yep.
And then the chain ring, because those are larger rings, and even though they're aluminum, they actually can wear a little bit longer sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes.
I mean, we're going to talk about at some point how to prepare for your visit to the bike shop, but this is one of those where an informed consumer is the best defense. Just like when you go for an oil change, you need to know what you need for your brake. You want to know what you need, and there are tools. In that one in particular, testing your chain is one of the easier.
There is a way to measure it with a ruler. Basically, pin to pin should be exactly 12 inches. And then depending on the chain, it's like 12 and an eighth is worn, or 12 and 3/8 is worn. And then there are just very, very simple, cheap tools that you can put down into the links. And it's almost like a go, no go. But you have to know which side you're using for your particular chain and so forth. I mean, it's also a case where a lot of shops, if your chain is just past worn and it's time to change the chain, they'll also say you need to change your cassette. And that is unfortunately not the case. So what I will usually do when I change the chain is then I test ride the bikes outside, and I will put pressure on every single cog on the rear, making sure that there's no skipping under reasonable pressure that I can do in the parking lot. If a chain is way past its stretch point, it is almost certain that there are a couple cogs on the rear of the cassette that are worn down too badly, and you just
right. So let's talk about levels of service. Right, there's usually service packages: bronze, silver, gold, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, pro, elite, whatever they call them. How do you? Because we can't speak to every shop, but how do you decide what goes in each package and how to price it?
So every shop, I would say, I'm just going to make that assumption here, is going to have their basic tune, no matter what it's called. And those basic tunes are to make sure that you can safely use your bike. Usually it does not include a lot of cleaning, and often it doesn't include any part replacement. So if you do need a new chain, you might get charged extra for that. If you do need new shift cables, you might get charged extra labor time for those cables.
Right.
And I mean not just for the parts, but the labor too.
Let's be clear. We're talking about labor time.
Yes, labor time.
Not you should expect to pay
for the parts.
Parts are never included in a service package.
Right.
So you need a new chain. Maybe the work to do the chain is included, but the chain itself, not. Okay.
Yes.
No, I mean, I think it's important because you're trying to figure out what you're going to end up spending, and you may not kind of have that in mind.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I would say most hybrids most is the wrong even term, but a lot of hybrids get usually basic tunes.
Okay.
If a hybrid is kept inside and it's lightly used or used sort of as intended and so forth, they often don't need much more than a basic tune. Okay. And hybrids also usually don't need their chains replaced as often just by the usage, not any other reason. Just because they're getting used in nicer weather with lighter duty, without as much grit on the everything and pressure on the pedals and all that type of stuff.
And let's talk about that type of bike, because I think that's the bike and the tune we ran into the most during the start of the pandemic, because we had a lot of people who were pulling bikes down off the wall.
Yeah.
Probably hybrids. They hadn't been used for a while. They would come to us and say, we need a tune up. They hadn't been used in years, but they also hadn't been stored in a puddle. We found that they could get away with more of that Saturday service.
A lot of them could.
Because there had been no wear and tear on them.
So a lot of them could just use that quick, I'm going to adjust, your brakes are a little bit out of left-right alignment, your shifting is just a little bit off.
Right.
And that kind of thing. Your tires, like one of the tires isn't actually seated all the way into the rim. That's kind of little stuff.
We started to call them wellness checks.
But you also found, so a lot of less expensive hybrids often use cables that aren't stainless steel.
Okay.
And so a lot of them could be 15, 20 years old. And honestly, there are a lot of really great hybrids were, say, made in the 90s even, right? And they're perfectly good bikes, but the cables need to get replaced because the shifting was really tight.
Yes.
There was corrosion and rust going on. Because even bikes that are stored in a basement or garage encounter moisture.
Yeah.
And so they had been sitting there and those cables corroded. And so a lot of them might have only needed that basic check on a Saturday, and others needed a mid-level package to get things going again nicely.
So that's like a basic package. So what would be, when you say a mid-level package, what does that, how does that start to jump up?
I include more things.
Okay.
Right? The pricing of the packages just comes down to the expected amount of time that a shop is going to spend. That's why the difference is there.
Yeah, and let's talk about that, because it's really based on the number of hours, time you expect it's going to be to work on the bike. That is getting trickier. Because
that's getting really tricky.
Why is that?
Tune-up packages from bike shops have been around for decades and decades. And 30 years ago, 20 years ago, bikes, whether it was a hybrid or a road bike or a mountain bike, was a very similar bike. Similar brakes, similar shifting, external cables. It was all, you could do the same work on all of these different bikes, and it was about the same. And you knew how much time it was going to take for these kind of things.
Right.
And that is just not the case now. Bikes are, and so here I'm gonna read this out, because this is the language I think we're gonna have on our new tune-up package area, and it's very, very similar to what other companies or other shops say. But one, you're gonna see actual rates can vary, and that is always the case. And then I'm gonna say the industry constantly changes, and bikes are becoming more proprietary and unique, which may require more time than typical. And that cannot be more the truth. Right?
I think the reality is everyone should understand that a service. First of all, I don't think, I know in your show notes you actually say, like, should we even bother with packages? I think we should.
Yeah.
And because part of it is because it gives people some idea of where it's going to start. Right. Maybe it's a range. Maybe you say it could be from this to this, but still. But I think that's important for everyone to understand that packages, service packages, are based on an estimate of hours.
Right.
And you may end up getting charged more because the number of hours that were required was more. And hopefully they tell you ahead of time, but sometimes you can't because you're in the middle of the bike, right? Like you're in the middle of...
I think every shop is going to be a little different like this. It has to get significant before I would even call them.
Okay.
My significant, I guess, is a
subjective.
Subjective. Yes.
I mean, it's like when you say to me that's expensive, and I'm like, is it a nickel or is it $500? And the answer could be either.
Right. In my situation, an extra $40, $50 is fairly insignificant.
Okay.
All right. Once we get above that,
right,
that also changes a little bit based on the customer. So there are certain customers that it is do whatever it takes.
Yep.
And then there are other customers. You have the customer bringing in their 20-year-old hybrid, and you're going to see them once every 3-4 years, and they ride it, a few times a summer, right? Then if something's going to be, you have $20, $25 more, I'll just probably let them know ahead of time.
So I think maybe this also comes back to you as the customer. When you bring a bike in, there's a process of evaluating what it's going to need and talking to the customer. And again, we're going to get into the customer.
Yeah.
Like the intake. There's an intake.
Sometimes
there's an intake person at the shop.
Yeah, the service writer.
Right.
Yep.
Oh, that's the term, right? Service writer. That's also the time to say, please call me if it needs any more than that.
Exactly.
You want it to be collaborative. You want to be partnering with your bike shop.
Right.
But you should be clear with your bike shop. Right. This is a beater bike. I just want to get it on the road and make sure it's safe.
Exactly.
This is a bike that I adore and I want you to put anything you can in it. Price is no consequence. I really can't go much above that. Right. And you should get an estimate. You should expect some kind of at least range of what they think it may cost unless they run into something crazy. And that's where service packages are helpful because before they even call you, they should have some idea
what they're looking at,
what it costs. I would be suspicious of any shop that won't tell you. I don't know if that's a thing, but like anybody who would say, well, I don't know, you should have some.
Yeah. And I mean, because I am a little smaller and more independent, I don't have a sort of a dedicated service writer, right? So
his name is Steve.
Exactly. And so I do work a little bit looser than other shops on that aspect, right? But as we just talked about how all of these bikes are just becoming more and more different and unique and proprietary, a lot of times it can be very difficult to find the problem up front when your bike's getting checked in to get that initial estimate of how much everything's going to be, because a lot of stuff can't be found now until it's really dug into by the mechanic. Okay. So, that's
right. So when you talk about, we've gone from the base service to like say a secondary service and a tertiary level of service. Is it that it's deeper, it's more time, but what are you doing with that time?
This is going to vary by shop, but there might be things that are included more in that mid-level tune. It's almost usually going to include more cleaning.
Okay. Degreasing.
And degreasing, yes.
Okay.
And degreasing can take definitely more time and energy. So more cleaning, more degreasing, more lubrication. Things like cable replacement, maybe chain replacement.
Yep.
It could...
Again, time, not part.
Time, not part.
Right.
I mean, you generally just sort of get into... Checking is a tough word to say because I like to think everything's sort of checked for a basic tune.
Right. It's not checking. These are for more heavy usage.
It is for more heavy
bikes
usage.
that are having more usage are going to, we know, need more things replaced. It's not that you're just checking the cables. You're checking the cables at all level. But once you get to that level, second level, you're probably someone who's riding your bike a lot. So you know the cables are probably going to have to get replaced or adjusted. You know
Right.
that your brake pads
your
are
brake
probably
pads
going to
need to
have
get
to get
replaced.
right. Or you had a long season, you hung it up, and now you're trying to get it ready for the spring. Right. That's really, I think, the big difference as I looked at the kind of levels.
Yep.
Do you need a tune-up every year?
So do you need it? That's a really loaded word.
Thank you.
If you're somebody who doesn't work on your own bikes or doesn't know how to check things and doesn't know how to do the small things, then I would say yes.
Okay.
Because it's going to catch certain items.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've actually had a few so far in just the past couple weeks where they came in and only really needed the base tune-up and the bike was in good condition, and I look back at last year, you know, and the customer comes in like, oh wow, like this was a lot cheaper than last year, and I look at their service from last year, and it was like, oh wow, they needed this and they needed this and they needed this, like they had a bunch of stuff last year, but because of that and because their usage was fairly normal, they actually didn't need that again.
Right.
They didn't need a lot of stuff again, but next year they probably will again.
Can how you care for your bike dictate how often you need a tune-up?
Yeah.
So basic stuff like
just
washing it?
Number one, cleaning. Clean. I cannot even stress that enough.
Finally understood the saying, because I'm not a horseback rider, ridden hard and put away wet. I think that's a horse thing, right? But
for saddles,
yeah,
I think.
For saddles and stuff.
Maybe.
But like with bikes, you see that all the time, right? You had it, and we've done it ourselves. You've had just a massive day on the bike. You've sweat on it. You have poured you've poured your hydration fluids all over it as you were drinking and eating. You went through mud. You put it on your car, so it also got that. You get home.
And you just hang it up.
If you're lucky, you hang it up or you lean it against the garbage can, and then you go inside and collapse. And then a week later, you come out and you're like, oh, honey.
Oh,
honey.
I mean, it's a lot of that filth on a bike can build up and it can bake on.
Yeah.
So I have customers who just never, ever clean their bikes. And so year after year, the bikes just become just grimier and filthier and dirtier, and it does not come off. Like it does not come off, right? You'd have to get out of like a power scrubber and basically take the paint off at that point to get the dirt off. It is so baked on to that frame and so forth. I mean, you know, the wearable parts are getting changed out, and then the bike just it is harder to diagnose problems. It is harder to fix problems with that kind of level of filth on the bike.
And when you leave like salt on it, like from your sweat, that can be really corrosive.
Yeah, and plus you are reducing the lifespan of your shocks because all that grime and dirt gets down into past the seals.
Yep.
So in the end, it just costs you a lot more.
And when we're talking about cleaning, it doesn't have to be extensive. It doesn't have to be.
No.
The chain even, we just talked about, a lot about replacing a chain, but cleaning your chain can actually extend the life of the chain too.
Oh, significantly, like double or triple the lifespan.
Right.
Yeah. So what wears those rollers wear down in the plates is grit, is fine grit.
Right.
The cleaner your chain, the less it will wear down, the longer it will last.
Right.
Well, 100%.
And it doesn't, to take care of your bike like that, doesn't take a lot of special equipment.
That's why mountain bike chains and gravel bike chains last less miles than road bike chains typically.
Oh.
And less than hybrids typically.
Okay.
If your chain ever gets wet, wipe it down when you get home and lube it.
Okay.
Like that is, I mean, people say, what is like the maintenance thing I can do? That is the number one thing to do. Also, keeping your chain lubricated
Okay.
and not over lubricated.
Because over lubricating can attract
fine
and
dirt
grind.
and grind and create a paste that grinds down the chain. So sometimes it's not even the case that your chain got wet. You need to clean it because it has now accumulated a lot of filth.
Right.
Yep.
Cleaning the bikes, I have to say, is one of my favorite things to do. And some of the best cleanings I've done where you will be like, oh my gosh, you worked so hard on this. I did not. I basically sat them outside. I sprayed them down with that pink stuff from Muck Off. I let it sit for a minute. I sprayed them with a hose. I wiped down the chain. I dried it. I looped it. I was done.
Yep.
Like I didn't even touch it with rags. Like I didn't even, scrub at it.
That's great to do when in warmer weather when the sun's out, because you do want to let the bike dry in the sun when you do that kind of thing.
In the sun. Yeah. But if it's not, I will bring it in to the living room, and they will sit on 2 beach towels, and I just let them sit there. And then our kids' friends say, why are there 2 bicycles in your living room?
Yeah.
And the kids go, what? There aren't bicycles in your living room. So let's talk about some of the things you encounter most often in tune-ups.
Okay, so let's go to a look at a list here of a lot of the stuff I find.
Do most.
We talked about worn chains. Worn chains is a big one. Misaligned brakes, meaning say they're not contacting, like mechanical rim brakes. They're not contacting the rim at the same time, left to right,
or they're dragging,
on the
tire
rim
itself.
Yep. Same thing with disc brakes. They're not running through the rotor smooth, or your rotor has a misalignment that needs to be done. Worn brake pads, rim or disc. Loose headsets is a huge one, where the fork steerer tube comes up through, right? That's a huge one. I find that all the time.
Okay.
Loose hubs, so there's wobble in the hub, and that just needs to be adjusted. The wheel truing, so how straight the wheel is running. Tire issues are often common. Loose bolts, find those all the time. So sort of under-torqued bolts. I don't rarely find a bolt that's really loose and was dangerous and about to fall off. But again, this is
hanging on.
But those bolts are loosening, so you're catching that.
Yep.
Oh, on hybrids with a kickstand, I often find the kickstand's loose and it's wobbling around, or
they fall down.
And that's it's knocking around. It's noisy. It's irritating. Yeah. So those are usually mainly nuisance issues. For the kickstand.
On the tires, one thing that was interesting, again, during our initial Saturday service from the pandemic was the number of the bikes. Again, great bikes were doing good. Dry rot in the tires. Right?
Yeah.
Because the rubber just, at some point, can't. It just ages. It's normal.
Yeah, well, during the pandemic,
old.
When we were getting those bikes that had been pulled out and hadn't been seen use in forever.
Yeah.
Dry rot is a long years and years and years thing that we were seeing, and it mostly you mostly see it in the gum wall, the tan wall, old tires, old like 26-inch mountain bike tires or hybrid tires. Those are super common to see that. Now, like if it's not completely, if the casing's not just completely fraying apart on the sides. Older tires, even though they can look perfectly fine, and they are in a lot of cases perfectly safe to ride, but the rubber has hardened, and so it no longer has grip.
Right.
And so that alone is a reason to change out tires many times, depending on the usage.
My other favorite were the little kids who would come in with just a obvious bald spot in the middle of their tire. And we'd say, are you skidding? And they would say, no.
Right.
Okay. And then you would watch them. You would watch them skidding. Like you're like, I wonder why their tire is bald.
Right. And then shifting problems, of course.
Right.
And that can be from sticking cables, corroded cables, clogged housing, failing housing. The metal strands that keep the housing together can actually start splitting apart and fail. Failing ends of that housing. Bent derailleur hangers we talked about. Problems with the derailleur itself. Loose cassettes. That's another one.
Just wobbly stuff.
And that is
that what you call slop?
Loose cassettes is... If you've been riding your bike for years, you're not going to have a loose cassette. unfortunately, when I see loose cassettes, it's because another shop had changed the cassette and forgot to put the backspacer on.
Ooh.
Yeah. So it's not right. So that's usually the case. And I can, I'll put the bike up on the stand and it's just instinctively, and I think it's like every mechanic, you spin the pedals and you make a shift.
Yeah.
And that first shift, I can hear the noise of that shift. I could go, oh, that's probably a loose cassette.
Oh.
And when I say loose cassette is that basically the lock ring that holds the cassette onto the hub is bottoming out on the free hub itself. So it's not pressing against that last small cog and pressing the cassette onto the free hub. And so what that does is there's not any tension on that, and so the each cog is slightly wobbling against itself. I mean, there's some cassettes out there that are one piece and they can't be loose like that, but most road and hybrid cassettes definitely.
And there are some services that people would come in. We spent a lot of time on Saturdays changing flat tires.
Yeah.
And we're happy to do it. But it's also probably one of the things that's the easiest to learn how to do for yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if you want to either save a little money or avoid going to the bike shop because you've got other stuff to do and you don't want to wait. Changing a flat tire is probably one of the, I can do it.
So
there are really good YouTube videos to show you how to do it.
There's a funny thing about flat tires in that if you take a small little 20-inch kid's bike with a coaster brake and training wheels and a little fender and the rear tire is flat, that bike will take easy two times, maybe even sometimes 3 times the amount of time that it would on any other bike. Because you have to unbolt the rear wheel, you have to uncouple the coaster brake connection. Right. Sometimes you actually have to take the fender off to get at the chain and the cog in the back. Yeah. Right? These are little single speeds.
You have to adjust that.
And then when you put everything back together, you have to get the chain tension just right. It is a process. So I charge more for that. That is, you just don't expect a shop to charge more for those kind of bikes to change a tube.
Well, and I think that's, again, it comes down to remembering that all you have, we talk about this at the agency also, at the marketing agency, all we really have is our time. Mm-hmm. Right. And there's only a certain amount of time in the day.
Right.
So you have to charge a certain amount for each hour. Yep. And you have to recognize that some things take longer. It's always the thing that doesn't seem like it should take the longest that does.
Right.
And it's the hardest to explain.
Yes. Absolutely.
So you're like, yes, this kid's bike, I could change this tire in 10 minutes and this one's going to take an hour and a half. And yes, there are other things that go into the costs, right? Like there are disposables, there's gloves, there's fluids, there's
people
stuff
have
like
to
that.
take into account that with each tune-up, I am also paying for, gloves, rags, paper towels, cleaners, lubricants, little odds and end cable things that I don't charge extra for.
Because it would cost...
Which cost me real money.
They do, but it would also cost more to try to calculate each little nibbly thing.
Some shops may.
Some shops
but they are paying real money for it, so if they charge, right?
But you try to work that into your pricing to recognize that it's hours plus some of those consumables. But then again, it's
the hourly rate...
the thing that takes the most.
Yeah, and the hourly rate tends to be based on incorporating some of those expenses. Right. But it could be that the shop is incorporated their lights and their heat and their air conditioning and their parking lot and all that kind of stuff into it, but not the rags and the lubes and everything, right? Mm-hmm. Which is usually incorporated often into the tune-up cost.
This is why we can only speak to what we do
as
a shop.
Right.
How we can get ready for our tune-up, because that will be good for the bike shop and for the biker.
Right.
Right. And number one is
clean
your bike.
Yeah. Just don't have, it doesn't need to be like washed, but don't have caked on mud.
This is mostly a mountain biker, gravel bike a little bit, but I actually posted a picture of my bike because I didn't want to shame anyone, right? You had one bike in the shop that was just disgusting.
Yeah.
Like it was just covered in mud. And we don't have, some bike shops have bike wash centers.
By the way, some shops will charge extra if a bike comes in like that.
So right off the bat. Anyway, I posted a picture of a different muddy bike, of my muddy bike, just to say, please wash your bike ahead of time. And that customer wrote me and said, this is because of me, isn't it? And I was like, dude, I tried really hard not to out you. Like, I really could have used your bike and I didn't. So yeah, clean your bike. Makes it easier to diagnose things.
Yes. I mean, I am going to clean the bike, but again, I don't also want to have a, mud all over or dried up dirt all over the floor of the shop too, as well, as I get all that off, right? Scrape all that off.
Knocking big things off. Okay. When you get there, what's that first conversation you're having with
Well, you definitely, if you're having any noises, let them know. Probably be asked where you think it's coming from.
Okay.
Any concerns you have. If you want, if parts are going to get changed out and you want those old parts.
Oh, yeah.
Then make sure you tell them that up front.
Right.
Because a lot of times it is difficult to get them after that if you don't.
Okay. That's good to know.
Right, because they're going to go out and recycling or they're in the trash or whatever.
Yep.
And I know like some people want their chains to do projects with and like old
jewelry.
chains. Yeah.
Well, and also if there's anything, maybe if it's a new bike to you, if there's anything that you wouldn't expect or you wouldn't know, if it's tubeless, what kind of fluid is it being used? Do you know what kind of, if you even know, right?
Yeah, let's go into tubeless for a second.
Let's go into tubeless.
I love tubeless, right? I love it on the gravel and the mountain bikes.
Yes.
But tubeless is a little bit of a... it is a little bit of a conundrum for shops in a way because tubeless can be finicky.
Okay.
And so if a shop is setting up a new bike or new wheel or whatever, or a wheel that hasn't been set up tubeless, if they're setting it up tubeless,
okay,
like I want to make sure, I want to get that set up and I want that to sit at least overnight so that I can check in the morning.
Oh, okay.
That it's still holding.
Yeah.
However, in some tubeless cases, you need to ride on the wheels for 3 minutes and it will set up. And if you don't ride on it for 3 minutes, it will slowly leak. This is getting better and better, but that is still sometimes the case. And so if somebody brings me just the wheels, right? I have no way to test ride and roll on those wheels.
Right.
Right.
Can you please set these up at tubeless? But you would, for the record, my employees regularly look outside and you're spinning around the parking lot riding a bicycle, which is, they say his job is hard.
Yeah, and then if somebody comes in, so if you're coming in for a tune-up, it's helpful for people who have tubeless wheels to understand at least some aspect of those in terms of what sealant they're using,
right? When
it was replenished last.
Yep.
Because it is definitely a lot more time-consuming for a shop to have to open up a tubeless wheel,
yes.
Right? Like if I'm just adding sealant, right? No problem. But what seal am I adding?
Well, because you can't mix them.
You can't mix a lot of different brands.
You can't mix a lot of them. You can't be like, it's fine. Whatever is in there will be great.
And if I have to, like my very top level package will include opening up the tire, cleaning out all the dried up sealant and replenishing.
Getting rid of that slug.
Right? But that is definitely time consuming.
Yes.
Really time consuming, especially to clean out old sealant. So, but if I have to even go in there and take a look and so forth, right? That just adding. It just makes things more complicated.
Yeah.
Plus I have to break the seal on that. Maybe it was a finicky setup to begin with.
Right. So just the more information you have about your bike, if it wasn't, say, purchased from and regularly maintained by the same bike mechanic, right? Like, so if it's from the same shop, as you said, you have notes.
Yeah.
So if it's a bike you sold. And you've done all the service. You've set it up and you service it.
That's the easiest
one. That's the easiest.
Yeah.
It's really it's a new mechanic relationship.
Yes.
They haven't seen this bike before. So you want to tell them as much as possible. Can you get records on your bike from your old mechanic? Is that a thing? Like my doctor's notes? Can I get my notes?
That's a good question. Could I suppose I
Could
could
you?
provide
Could
somebody
somebody
with that,
export? I mean, that would mean you had to say to someone, I'm going to a different mechanic.
Yeah.
It's like try and go
Right.
to a new doctor and you have to tell them that you're going because you have to send your records.
Right.
But also on every receipt, it does have details, at least for you. When you print out or email a receipt, it shows all the details from your service, right? Or at least the parts you used.
Yeah, this is going to be shop to shop, but you will definitely see like the itemized parts that were used,
Okay.
right? Because if a shop is charging for the part, it's going to be separate on your receipt.
Right.
But you might just have that one line item bass tune or
Yes.
whatever tune, right? And that's it. It depends on me, but many, many times I am writing notes on detailed notes on what was done.
Yeah.
Unless there was,
Unless there's nothing done. It was that bass tune
sometimes
done.
bikes come in and they need a little shifting adjustment, a little brake adjustment, a little headset adjustment,
Right.
and cleaning and drivetrain lubrication. But all that's sort of the normal stuff.
Right.
I'm not really. I might just put they got this tune.
Yeah.
Right. Without any further notes on that.
Right.
Usually, if I found something or I had to change something, then I'm making notes on what and why.
Right. And they do come out on the receipt. I mean, the reality is if someone is determined to keep track of it, they could, right? Because then, which if you ever sold the bike or you moved somewhere, you got a new mechanic, that might be helpful to be able to say, by the way, here's all the records I kept on the bike.
Yeah.
The other thing is you can't necessarily expect that every bike shop will also service every bike. I mean, let's talk about you,
Oh,
for
yeah,
example,
right.
So you don't service e-bikes.
I don't service e-bikes.
We make that very clear. But we also just added a wording to the site that basically says, Steve the Bike Guy reserves the right to refuse to service a bike that we do not think we can service satisfactorily or safely.
Right.
And I don't like to bike shame. Right. But there are some bikes, we'll say non-bike shop brand bikes, that you just prefer not to service. Why is that?
I like to say that there's nothing that requires a bike part to actually work.
No, if there's a bike, there's no legal requirement. It actually
There's certain department store bikes, and it's getting better.
Yes.
But they would make a part that looked like a brake because it looks like a brake, but it doesn't need to stop. And that's a big one, brakes.
Yes.
Right. So like a bike might come in like that, and it'd be like, there is nothing I can do to make these brakes work. And a lot of times this is a parent bringing in a kid's bike.
I was going to say, it does seem to be higher.
And if I don't think that I could make that brake, if this kid lives at the top of the hill and there's a stop sign at the bottom, that's sort of in my mental head.
Yeah, yeah.
And this kid's like, yeah, let's go down the hill real fast. And they can't stop within a normal, or normal rate that a normal bike should be able to do, which a lot of these bikes will not be able to. And no matter what I do to that brake, it will not. Then that is not a bike I want to touch.
Yeah. We've talked about winter tune-ups.
Yes.
Right. And it's very common for bike shops in the winter. They're quiet. So they'll say, sign up for your 2-for-1 service. We're not judging anyone. You have said to me you don't love to service bikes in the winter.
Yeah.
Why is that?
There are a couple reasons. So the first is that if it's a customer in a bike that is just getting used, doesn't matter what time of the year it is.
Yep.
Great. No problem. All right. But if it's a customer who's like, I'm going to get this bike done now in the winter while it's slow and I can easily get into the shop and there's no wait time, but I'm not going to touch this thing then. I'm going to hang this thing up and I'm not going to touch it till April or May.
Yeah.
So it's going to be sitting in a humid garage.
Or cold. Welcome to New England.
Whatever. Yeah, exactly. Especially in this area for 4 months.
Okay.
Like their experience on that bike is not going to quite be what I want it to be, because now that chain, like they could take that out, and even though I cleaned and lubed the chain, it's now squeaky because it's been sitting in all this moisture. And we have these days here, especially in the spring, where we have these massive temperature changes. Like tomorrow, today's 40 and rainy. Tomorrow's going to be 65 and rainy. And I think and it's going to be more humid, and every single metal thing in the garage is going to be soaking wet.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what can happen with bikes that are sitting. Then they're going to take it out, and it's not going to be the experience that I want them to have on their freshly. I'm going to
right, because they'll be like, I just had this tuned up.
Right. So that's one of the reasons. The other is that it can be, depending on our weather here, difficult for me to test ride a bike outside. And I want to test ride everything outside, because something that's good in the stand, you can't it is not necessarily good outside while actually riding. You can't hear things without actively riding it.
Under pressure, under
load.
Yeah.
Right. And so that is another reason.
If somebody did get a tune-up, let's say in February, they're not going to use it until April. Would it help if they kept it inside? Like, would that make you feel better about
if it's kept in a more climate controlled situation, then absolutely. Absolutely. But even then, they probably want to apply a fresh coat of lube to the chain. Yeah.
Okay, so that's too early. Would you say we have a big ride around here, the Pan Mass Challenge, which there is a set of riders at the PMC. I adore them, but there's the people that train and they're riding their bikes all the time. And then there's this set of riders that about a week before the PMC, they pull their bike down, they bring it in, and they want to get a tune-up.
Right.
Would you say they should maybe get that a little earlier than right before their ride so they have time to ride it?
Yeah. So I have this coming just this past week. So I had a woman who's going taking her road bike on a trip to Mallorca. All right.
Ooh la la.
And so she wanted to get it checked out before that.
Yeah.
But it's a situation where once I service it, I want her to go for a ride or two to make sure everything is good. No matter what, no matter where you go, things can happen.
Yes.
Or just you don't want to get a service and then go for that massive 200-mile weekend ride for PMC, or instantly pack up the bike and go over, on your cycling vacation. Just in case.
Yep. I mean, we've seen it. You set up a tent in Dover Sherburne, which is just a couple towns over, for when the PMC starts. And the number of people that you have taken care of who left the start, they rode, how many miles is it? 5 miles.
Yep.
And something is not working.
Yes.
And they'll say, I just brought it to the shop.
Yes.
And I don't even blame the shop. They did not get on the bike.
Yes, exactly.
Afterwards, to make sure, they just need to give themselves a little bit of time.
You're absolutely right. That happens. They had it tuned up and they didn't ride it at all until the event day.
And it might be stuff like, my saddle's a little too high. It doesn't necessarily, it's not, again, not something I'm saying that the bike shop could have done wrong. It's just that the saddle's a little high. There's not enough air in their tire because the tubeless didn't stick, whatever.
Well, there's a good one, and that's just less experienced riders who might have had a tune-up, and then they don't touch their bike, and then 2-3 weeks later they go to do the PMC, and you they get to me, and it's like, wow, your tires are down to 30 psi, and it's because they didn't think I just had a tune-up 3 weeks ago. They were probably topped off then, but that was 3 weeks ago.
We do have a friend. We have to regularly remind that air is free, and he can pump up his tires whenever he wants.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's tune-up time, so
it is tune-up time.
It's gonna get into a busy
and April
time of year.
is busy.
Yes.
Yeah, April is always busy for all of us Northeast shops.
Yep. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Would you like to get into a scene while scrolling?
Here's a good one for everybody, and
Yes.
I have opinions. So the Taipei Cycle Show is going on right now.
Okay.
And you could certainly go on to your, YouTube or your social media channels and probably see lots of videos of people showing everything they're looking at there. One of the things that's come out are 32-inch mountain bike tires. All right, and wheels. As opposed to your 29ers that everybody rides.
So I just upgraded from 27 and a half plus.
Yeah.
Me knowing stuff. To 29ers.
Yeah.
That took me a bit.
Yep.
And you're telling me
So
they're going
hold on.
bigger. So hold on.
So hold on. Yeah, yes. And I'm sure somebody out there. Now, okay, years ago, somebody built this 36-inch wheeled mountain bike. And then Focus did this whole video for it for April Fool's Day. Okay, it was a whole April Fool's Day prank. We're coming out with this new 36-inch wheeled mountain bike. It was a whole April Fool's.
Got it.
This is not that. This is real. But stop it. Just stop it. Like, this is ridiculous. Well, I am,
because it's too big.
It's just like, this feels like, everybody owns a 29er. Let's make something new. So everybody has to buy a new bike situation. And I am not always taking that position. I was very early in road disc.
Okay.
And I was very early, like getting it the week it came out, of mountain bike electronic SRAM axis derailleurs,
Yes.
right, and shifting.
And
I had, when both those things came out, I was like, this is sort of the future.
Yep.
And I got a bunch of them, and I could not give them away because
Really?
I was such an early adopter in a way.
Okay.
And I thought it was going to be the next big thing, but it takes years for people to come on. And now if you go on the Friday night mountain bike rides, 25 of the 30 riders have electronic shifting nowadays, right? I mean, but at the time when I got it, it was everybody was like, meh, and now,
because they didn't understand the why, right?
Because they didn't understand the why.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say this is not one of those, but I'm going to say this is not one of those.
Well, okay, so here's my initial reaction, because I actually I was talking to two riders this weekend, two friends of mine, petite riders,
Yes,
right, who are already struggling with finding bikes that are appropriate to them.
Yep.
That cannot. Let's be clear, like. They cannot, this was actually kind of revelation to me. They cannot find a mountain bike, even an extra small, that they can stand over without it hitting in the hoo-ha.
Yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. And that is compounded by the 29ers, right? Because we're lifting everything up. Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you if, we can get smaller wheels, right? Like, can people get smaller wheels? And what you're telling me is that they're getting bigger.
Yeah, I mean, there are full suspension bikes where they put 27 and a half on their smaller frames. Okay.
Yeah.
Bigger is just something that nobody's asking for. And I'm sure some engineers out there, well, if the rollover potential of the 29er was greater than the 26 and greater than the 27 and a half, then even bigger is even better. But
right,
we have to just stop this. Like,
doesn't that completely change, like, those fit in frames, or you have to get a completely new frame?
Geometry? The frame has to be made for this as well. You can't just put this 32-inch wheel into a frame made for 29ers. I mean, it's just everything is different. And it is already a case where when you look at the average height of people, the way bikes are designed and made and sized, I would say overall skews definitely towards above average height of people.
There's no question.
Yeah.
Because while these two women are petites, they are not outside the norm of people I see regularly. Like, I am tall. I am 5'10". And if there's anything I've learned over the years, is it is really easy to make a small thing bigger. It is impossible to make a big thing smaller. Right?
Yeah.
And the challenge is that smaller people shorter people have to finding equipment is just getting worse because of this bias towards a taller person. And honestly, frankly, bike shops not understanding, or bike manufacturers. I mean, one of them I was talking to today, and she said that a bike shop said to her, well, why does standover matter? And it's like, how about I tell you, every time you get off your bike, I'm going to smack you in your balls with a baseball bat. I mean, she can't just get off the bike without concern that if she just bends her leg a little too much, she's going to whack it. She's going to whack the top tube.
Yeah. I'll keep an eye on that, but I just hope it gains no traction.
Get it? Anything else for today?
No, let's wrap this up.
Cycling Together with Kristin and Steve is a production of Steve the Bike Guy, an independent bicycle shop in Eastern Massachusetts, and Sundin Marketing.
And if you like the show, please follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at Steve the Bike Guy.
You can also like, review, or leave us a comment. Thanks for joining the ride.
See you next time.